Thank you, Mr. Babbitt. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. As you know well, addressing pilot fatigue was a high priority issue for the FAA under your leadership. In December of 2009, then FAA Associate Administrator Margaret Peggy Gilligan testified before this very committee that, and I quote, "We believe," this is quoting her, "we believe that it is critical whenever possible to incorporate scientific information on fatigue and human sleep physiology into regulations on flight crew scheduling. Such scientific information can help to maintain the safety margin and promote optimum crew performance and alertness during flight operations." More importantly, FAA acted in late 2011 to publish new rules on pilot fatigue, which many, including the then chair of the NTSB, believe was a contributing factor to the deadly, tragic, and preventable Kogan crash that killed 50 people in early 2009. FAA's rules were common sense: limit the amount of time pilots can be on duty and pilot flight time, and implement a minimum requirement of rest before a duty day. Chair Hamidi, you recently stated, and I quote, "When it comes to these recent high-profile aviation incidents, mistakes by air traffic control, flight crews, or ground personnel are sometimes cited as a contributing factor. But is it really human error when 96% of your workplaces are exhausted and don't have adequate staffing?" Chair Hamidi, is it time for FAA and Congress to re-examine and update rest rules that are tailored to optimize air traffic controller performance?
Well, it isn't just the number of hours, it's the scheduling practices. And then if you're already short-staffed, then you have people who are working mandatory overtime, 6 days a week, 10-hour days. And then when you look at the schedule, it's a constantly rotating schedule. I have one from one event, a schedule for a week from one event that we're currently investigating. We've got 2 evenings, a morning shift, another evening shift, another morning shift, a day off, an evening. All of that can impact your circadian rhythm. So, and then where you end up with that is distraction, fatigue, you're missing things, you're forgetting things. That's all an impact.
I feel like, what was taken as the minimum amount of rest has now become the standard way that we schedule folks, and I don't think that that is sustainable. President Santa, could you share the air traffic controller workforce perspective on why rest rules are needed to better protect ATC crews and the flying public?
Thank you for the question. It comes down to the redundancy and the resiliency of our staffing. We're so short-staffed in most or many of our facilities that service air travel right now that we don't have the opportunity or the capacity to have a 5-day work week with 8-hour days. The norm, like you said, keeping the system active, keeping the capacity at the level that it is expected to be, requires 6-day work weeks and 10-hour days due to the fact the hiring, FAA's model of hiring, and what they produce on the controller workforce plan has exacerbated the situation, resulting in 1,000 fewer controllers in this elevated aviation upturn. It's unsustainable, and it needs to be changed through FAA reauth because the FAA has been unwilling to collaboratively involve these new processes.
Thank you. If Congress's primary role in passing the Airline Safety Act of 2010 was to prevent future Kogan area-type disasters, one must recognize that it has been a success, starting with a 99.8% reduction in Part 121 fatalities since enactment, since when the rules went into effect. We must never take the post-Kogan safety system for granted, and that's why I strongly oppose tinkering with the 2010's law statutory requirements, including the 1,500-hour rule. Now, as a military pilot, I flew simulators, and I agree. If you have 6-degree of motion, full immersion simulators, that is an immense tool and a very useful tool. But I do think that if we just substitute some of the 1,500 hours and just say structured simulator time, but don't specifically say what type of simulator, what kind of training that's going to be. You can burn holes in the sky in a simulator just as well as you can burn holes in the sky in a 152. So I think we need to be clear when we say, let's talk about simulators, that we're talking about full motion, 6-degree, full immersion simulators, and not Microsoft Flight Simulator sitting in a hotel ballroom someplace. Our safety management system protocols do not appear to be accounting for new risks in our system, and the aggregate of these risks, such as less experienced workforce and pervasive air traffic control shortages. Mr. Ambrosi, at a time when we have a 737 and a 767 flying within 100 feet of each other, and every other month seems to bring a new chilling runway incursion or near miss, would you agree that the most prudent and safest course of action would be to add additional experience and training requirements rather than seeking to weaken or water down the 1,500-hour rule?
Well, thank you for the question. Absolutely. It's an all of the above. You need that real-world experience as well as better training. So it's an all of the above.
I do think that what we can do is, as you're trying to get to that 1,500-hour rule, we could break that down and say you actually need a certain number of IMC hours, you need a certain number of, cross-country hours, and be very specific in that, which is what happens in the military, which is much more structured than their average person trying to get to 1,500 hours at the local FBO. I am out of time, over time, and with that, I will recognize the Ranking Member Moran for his questions.
Chairwoman, again,